All right, and we back on the forecast. So down in Florida near Orlando, a brother by the name of Christoper Lewis and his wife and 12-year-old son was in their own home minding their business when they had their house shot up by the police. So let's go back and find out how this could even happen.
Developing tonight, an Ocoee family is demanding answers from police about why they stormed into their home and allegedly opened fire.
And that's a bullet hole through the screen.
And we just found out 2 of the officers involved were already under internal investigation for another incident. Tonight, we're still pushing for answers about how 2 Ocoee police officers ended up shooting at that house overnight. The family who lives there says the whole thing started when a patrol car showed up at the wrong place following a call for help that came from somebody else. It happened around 1 a.m. at a home on Belhaven Falls Drive, and that family told Channel 9's Field Sutton they're lucky to be alive.
When investigators finally left the scene after 11 hours, they left behind bullet holes just about everywhere. A neighbor's security camera caught officers arriving right around 1 a.m., but what it missed was the confusion at the front door. The father told Eyewitness News he woke up to a loud banging on the door, thought it was a burglar, went out there and yelled for whoever it was to identify themselves. But he says all he got was silence, so he went to grab his gun. When he came back, he says officers had a bright light shining through the glass, saw that he was armed, and yelled, "Gun." Late this afternoon, I asked the Ocoee Police Department if those officers had any business being at that house last night, and they tell me that is now up to the FDLE to decide because an investigation is underway. That father says the department has not apologized, even though his home was sprayed with bullets. They went through doors, walls, furniture, and appliances, all while the family laid on the living room floor, hoping not to be hit or even killed. When the gunfire finally stopped, they say police came in and handcuffed the dad, the mom, and their 12-year-old son. Tonight, we've confirmed officers Carlos Agelero and Stephanie Roberts were the ones involved. Just last week, their attorney told 9 Investigates they're both under internal investigations that predate this incident. In Ocoee, Field Sutton, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.
Tonight, Roberts and Anglero are both on administrative leave while the FDLE does its investigation.
So police officers Carlos Agelero and Stephanie Roberts pulled up to this family's home at about 1 o'clock in the morning and started knocking on the door. Now, the brother Christoper Lewis says he came down, asked 4 times, "Who is it?" and nobody said anything. So he went to go get his gun because he thought it was a burglar or something, which is literally what the Second Amendment is for, literally what the NRA fights for. But of course, they don't have any interest in a case like this. But apparently, one of the cops saw he had a gun through the glass and then just yelled "gun," and they started shooting up the house. Never mind who or whatever is in this house. Let's just shoot it up because we see something through the glass that looks like a gun. Now, luckily, they didn't hit anybody. Nobody got hurt. But the police who say they were responding to a domestic abuse call were at the wrong address. They say the operator gave them the wrong address. But even if you were responding to a domestic abuse call, why would you shoot the house up? Now, of course, Officer Carlos Anglero said he shot because he feared for his life. He's a cop, so of course he was terrified. And he says that his actions fit with his training that he's had. Now, even though they decide not to charge the female cop, Officer Stephanie Roberts, they do decide to charge Officer Carlos Anglero.
Now to that Ocoee police officer indicted by a grand jury for shooting into the wrong house. If you keep tabs on WFTV.com or follow Channel 9 Shannon Butler on Twitter, you saw her break the news of the indictment this morning and the fact that the officer, Carlos Agelero, turned himself in overnight. Shannon, he was indicted after the homeowner testified during those proceedings.
Well, he did, and we were told the 2 officers involved in this shooting did not testify in front of that grand jury. It is still unclear what kind of evidence the grand jury heard or why they came to this decision to only indict one of those officers. In fact, that indictment is still sealed. It's hard to tell now, looking at this home on Belhaven Falls Drive, that it was ever the scene of what's now being considered a crime. Back in February, this is what it looked like after 2 Ocoee police officers shot it up. That night of February 6th, the homeowner told Channel 9 he heard a knock at the door at 1:30 in the morning. He said he asked 4 times who was at the door. He claims that no one identified themselves as police officers, so he got his gun. He said when the officers saw that gun, they started shooting inside his home, barely missing him. He told us they fired 9 times through the front door. Today, the family attorney said this was the right decision.
To hear that the grand jury handed down an indictment for at least one of the officers was good news for them. They've been obviously suffering and struggling emotionally.
It turned out that the officers had been sent to the wrong home after dispatchers used cell phone towers to pinpoint the caller's location. The dispatcher was investigated, but in the end, it seems the blame is falling on this one Ocoee police officer. Now, Carlos Anglero is actually still an Ocoee police officer. He is on administrative leave without pay. As for Stephanie Roberts, the one that was not indicted, she has been fired from Ocoee PD.
Now, even though both of these officers were shooting into the house, they probably cut a deal with the female officer to testify against the other officer.
34-year-old Carlos Agelero, an Ocoee police officer, is charged with shooting into an Ocoee home in the Brookstone subdivision on February 6, 2016.
Do you see the person who you saw firing into that house on that day here in this courtroom?
Yes.
And if you could, just point him out and describe what he's wearing.
It's Officer Anglero. He's in a blue suit.
Anglero and Officer Stephanie Roberts responded to Belhaven Falls for a domestic disturbance, but they were at the wrong house. Ocoee homeowner Christoper Lewis says someone woke him up around midnight, banging on his door and ringing his doorbell. Lewis testified he never opened the front door. He says he got his gun from his bedroom after no one identified themselves.
I started to dive after the first shot went past my left ear and the left side of my face and smelled the gunpowder.
The bullets hit the family's window and went through the wall. This is home surveillance of what appears to be an officer with a gun.
At the time, I assumed it was coming from the inside, but what I know about ballistics, yes, it was obvious it was from the outside.
The state introduced the officer's 9mm Glock into evidence. A crime scene tech testified that 4 shots were fired from his firearm, 2 from his partner, and 2 other bullets were beyond damage that cannot be positively identified. The family was ordered to go outside with their hands up. Christoper Lewis said he left his gun inside the home. Lewis says he never fired his weapon. Meanwhile, the state has rested, and the defense will begin calling its 2 witnesses tomorrow morning, including the defendant, Officer Carlos Agelero. Court resumes at 10 a.m.
Now, the thing about these 2 cops, they both filed claims against the police department for harassment, for sexism, and for racism. And the lawsuit said that the department could allow corrupt cops without fear of discipline, and where top brass could make racist and sexist comments, like Lieutenant Steve McCursker. And Officer Anglero, in his lawsuit, claims that because he is Hispanic that he receives harsher discipline than his white colleagues. And they both claim Lieutenant Steve McCursker compared a black officer to a monkey and told a female officer that she couldn't be promoted because she kept getting pregnant. Now, even though they did not charge Officer Stephanie Roberts, they fired her a day after she filed the lawsuit, and they eventually settled with her for $50,000. They charged Officer Carlos Agelero with a second-degree felony, and he was found guilty.
And more breaking news right now at 6. A guilty verdict slammed down against an Ocoee police officer.
Carlos Agelero told the jury that he shot into the wrong home because he feared for his life, but the jurors came back with a unanimous verdict. West 2's Gail Pascal-Brown joins us live now from the Orange County Courthouse. Gail.
Yeah, it took jurors less than 2 hours to come back for a guilty verdict for Carlos Agelero, the Ocoee police officer. He has been found guilty of shooting into a house, in fact, the wrong address during a domestic disturbance call in Ocoee 2 years ago. Police were sent to the wrong address in the Brookstone subdivision instead of a house a half a mile away. Today, the officer took the stand in his own defense, but it only took jurors an hour and a half to come back with a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Carlos Agelero, guilty of the charge of shooting at, within, or into a building in violation of Florida Statute 790.19. So say we all.
Now, the 6 jurors were polled, and it was a unanimous decision. Sentencing for the Ocoee police officer has been set for March 27th at 10 a.m. here at the Orange County Courthouse.
Now, as many Hispanics, especially police officers, who try to fit in with the white dominant society and try to uphold its values and uphold its laws, somehow that I fear for my life doesn't work as effective as it does for other groups of cops. And we have to pay attention to how these other groups jump back and forth over that minority fence. Sometimes they're over here with us when it benefits them, then they're over there with them when it benefits them. When it comes to whatever benefits there are from what our ancestors fought for, then they're on our side and they want to fight for equality and social justice. But then be those same people who will turn around and defend people like George Zimmerman or the cop who shot Philando Castillo, Officer Jimenez. At the end of the day, we have to learn that we are all we got. Plus, we can't help no other group if we can't help ourselves anyway. We don't have time to be caping for nobody but ourselves right now. But I'm glad that this family is all right, and they had no problem getting a guilty verdict in this case. But we got to put our tribalism to the side. We all we got. We can't fight over our beliefs and petty differences. We can't afford it. We aren't the only group who does that. We just can't afford to do that.
Breaking news, a jury just convicted a former Ocoee police officer of shooting into the wrong home. Channel 9's Shannon Butler sat through the trial, and Shannon joins us live. Shannon, the jury ruled Carlos Anglero was at fault even though the dispatcher sent him to the wrong house that night.
Yeah, they clearly thought that that wasn't a big enough mistake to allow this officer to shoot into this home. Clearly, they took a look at this evidence, and even though that homeowner had a gun, he was not a threat to the Ocoee police officer. Carlos Agelero had very little reaction in the courtroom today as that guilty verdict was read. He is facing years behind bars, and the family who did testify in this case, not here in the courtroom as that verdict was read. They have been here for the last couple of days. Now, earlier today, the defense attorneys really tried to explain to the jury that he was in fear for his life, and that is why he fired. But the prosecution had a strong defense saying that you just can't fire into some innocent family's home blindly.
Doesn't get to play God like that. What he did is he fired into that house when he shouldn't have. And actions have consequences. His actions equals a crime.
Everyone is operating on fear, on adrenaline, and with one desire, to stay alive.
Now, Ocoee police just sent out a statement. They said they know about this verdict, that after this happened, they did take a look at their policies and procedures, but they didn't say if they had made any changes. They said their case now is closed. As for the homeowner, we know that from the beginning, they have been considering a civil lawsuit against the city of Ocoee. Anglero will be sentenced now in March.
Right now at 6 o'clock, a fired Fort Lauderdale police officer testifies for the first time in his own defense about sending racially charged text messages. James Wells was fired along with 2 other officers. A 4th resigned. A 3-day arbitration hearing for Wells just ended at City Hall, and that's where we find CBS 4's Joe Murray again tonight with more on what he had to say. Joan?
Good evening, Elliot. Well, it was an extraordinary moment because from the time this scandal broke a year ago, we've never heard from any of these officers about what was behind those questionable text messages. So now it is up to an arbitrator to decide, was he out of line on the force?
State your name, please. James Wells.
Out of the gate, James Wells insisted he is not a racist.
Do you have a negative opinion of African Americans? Absolutely not.
The first time Wells has spoken publicly about the scandal that led to his firing as a Fort Lauderdale police officer last year. He's trying to convince an arbitrator his dismissal wasn't fair and he should be reinstated.
Jimmy, what would Big Dad do to that end? Get that end out from under the wagon, and then James Wells' text messages and that end lover in the wagon.
Investigators say Wells exchanged racially charged messages with 3 other officers and an offensive homemade video violating rules of conduct and code of ethics. Under the watchful eyes of community members he once pledged to protect and serve, Wells said the texts are not who he is.
I enjoy helping people.
Wells said extensive use of the N-word refers to a specific type of bad guy.
The worst of the criminals. Not a specific race, not a specific gender.
In a grilling that lasted hours, Wells said some of the texts are taken out of context, and often he was quoting from the movie Django Unchained, which deals with slavery.
Not only did I think, I thought I was assured privacy in this conversation.
Pressed by the city's attorney to admit what he said is wrong, Wells acknowledged police officers are held to a higher standard.
Can you think of any of these comments that you use that would go over as a part of team building, community building?
No.
After it was all over, Wells gave his wife a big hug. She has been here every day for these proceedings. What happens next? Well, both sides will submit closing arguments, and then the arbitrator has 30 days to render an opinion on whether Wells should be reinstated on the force. We'll keep you posted.
A Burns Middle School teacher has been placed on administrative leave over a controversial test that was given to some 8th graders. Parents say that test included questionable language and subject matter that just did not belong in the classroom.
Fox 10 News investigative reporter Renee Dials has been looking into this allegation. She's in the studio now to tell us what she discovered. Renee?
Well, Bob and Lenise, everyone to whom I showed this test say they can't believe it was actually given to students. It's a 10-question math quiz that highlights prostitution, drugs, and drive-by shootings. I talked to parents and several students who confirmed they were given the quiz on Friday. Some of the kids thought it was kind of funny, but their parents aren't laughing.
Well, my son, he took a picture of it in class and he texted it to me, and I was blown. I couldn't believe it.
Erica Hall says her son sent her a text photo of the quiz his 8th grade language arts teacher passed out Friday. Hall says even the kids thought it was some kind of joke.
Took it as a joke, and she told him that, you know, it wasn't a joke and that they had to complete it and turn it in.
The Halls headed to the school today for some answers. This is a copy of the test Hall says her child was given. After outlining the math for a problem involving an AK-47, question 1 asks, how many drive-by shootings can Ramon attempt before he has to steal enough ammunition and reload? Question 8 reads, Tyrone knocked up 4 girls in the gang. There are 20 girls in his gang. What is the exact percentage of girls Tyrone knocked up?
Wow. No, ma'am. Unacceptable.
Kanitha McMillan is also a parent at the school. She says she wouldn't want the test given to her 6th grader. I also showed the test to Kelly Lee. She didn't realize her daughter Peyton was in the class that received the test.
My language arts teacher gave it to us to work, and I was kind of laughing at it because I thought it was off.
I'm shocked. I can't believe that's something these questions they would ask children. I don't think this is appropriate at all.
I did some research to try to find out where this test originated, and what I discovered is that it apparently has a long history. Similar versions of the 10-question quiz have been turning up in classrooms across the country since the 1990s, and a lot of teachers have found themselves in hot water over the test in several states, including Texas, California, and New Mexico. And the Mobile County Public School System may be next on the list.
No, she's been there for a while. My son said that this is actually her last year. She's retiring.
The school system has not released the teacher's name. We're told after the parents visited the school this morning, the principal checked out the allegations. A school resource officer investigated the matter, and the teacher was immediately placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the investigation.
You see it? What's your name? I can't see your name.
Here I do.
What's your probable cause to ask for my name?
Because you're being criminally trespassed from this property.
Okay. Can I see your ID, please?
No, you can't.
Why is there something against me seeing your name but you give no mine? You got to have a probable cause to ask for my name.
This man needs to go to jail for criminal trespass. You're under arrest.
Wow, he need to go to jail for criminal trespassing.
Hey, y'all give me a hand.
Wow.
They go to the helmet. Let go of the helmet. Let go of the helmet.
Look, I ain't getting nothing, man.
Criminal trespassing at Walmart? For real? We were just sitting here talking.
Take him down. Tase him. Tase him.
It's hazing? For real, man? Really?
Go back up. Back up.
Okay.
Back up.
I'm backing. I'm going back. You ain't gotta touch me. Wow.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Put your hands behind your back. Put your hands behind your back.
Wow.
Okay, I got one right here.
That's ridiculous. You just gonna keep tasing him.
Fuck, man. Man, this shit, man. What the fuck is going on?
Y'all part of this protest?
Man,
Need to leave. Need to leave right now, or you can go with him. Leave right now, or go with him.
Man, oh, shit!
Let's go. Go.
Whoa, man.
Turn around.
Really? I'm moving. This is my fucking car. This is my car right here.
Ran out of time.
This is my car. Wow.
I got one.
I'm moving. I got my hands behind my back, man. Wow, man. I was getting in my car. This is my car right here. This is my car.
You ran out of time.
I ran out of time. I was backing up. You told me to leave and I was going to my car.
Okay.
Wow, man.
Tough shit. I've been patting down there.